Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Rabid Hedgehog, and kind of want to discuss some things about air-cooled versus liquid-cooled engines, especially while city riding. Well, you know, one of those things, right? I've been riding both of them for quite a while now, and they both have their pros and cons for sure. But, you know, especially here where we have days that are hot all the time, it seems like, and you know, we don't exactly know what we're going to get as we sit around and deal with the heat, but hey, we deal with it. We you know, go ahead and ride anyway, right? But at any rate, when it comes to riding in the city, you know, what exactly is the best type of engine that you want to run with? Is it the liquid cooled or is it the air cooled? In this case, you know, today it's definitely the Harley Davidson, so I'm on the air-cooled version of the bike, and you know, when it comes down to it, stoplights are pain. Harley Davidsons and the V-twins that are air-cooled have the distinction of being kind of hard to keep cool while sitting still. I have to say that in that regards, when it comes down to it, you definitely want to have more or less a parallel twin that is air-cooled in the city that has a bigger oil cooling system on the front of it. Then you want the Harley Davidson Giant V-twin that really suffers a lot from the heat. As I ride this thing in the city, it gets to the point where the transmission doesn't like it too much. The engine seems to lose a little bit of power and a little bit of viability to it, and it does kind of get concerning when it comes down to it. It's just one of those things where you know, you kind of fill it out and you realize that, hey, this heat's actually making this engine not so good. Now, when it comes down to it, when you take liquid-cooled into the city, well, there's not much of an issue. The liquid-cooled engines seem to hold their power a lot better. There is a little bit of a bleed-off, obviously, because a lot of the liquid-cooled motors still don't have, like, a fan on the front end of them that help cool the radiator at a standstill and things like that. However, the liquid cooling still does keep it a lot more linear on power instead of it suffering from heat. So, you know, that's just one thing you have to think about when riding in the city is how much traffic are you going to be dealing with? How much stoppage are you going to have to deal with? What's the temperature outside? And is it worth it? Because, you know, a lot of heat could tear up your engine and eventually wear its life down, which is kind of sad because I don't want this engine to give up on me, you know? But it's kind of nice that, you know, I don't have to go too far into the city or anything like that, because I live out where it's pretty much, well, nothing but cows and stuff. So that helps out. I don't have to deal with the traffic that much and all that, but, you know, sitting here in this city right now, like, you could feel the heat coming off this thing, especially this back cylinder on this bike, because the Harley Davidson and the V-twin, the reason why it's so hard to cool in the city is because it's linear, and it takes in a lot of air while moving. You know, air moves around it, moves through it that way. But sitting still, the only real place it gets air is whichever direction whichever direction the wind is going at the moment. So that's why you usually get that extreme heat bleed off on that back cylinder, especially because it's harder to cool that one in the V-twin configuration. But you know, it is what it is. And you know, today it's actually about 100 degrees, definitely toasty, and I would have brought my Kawasaki into the city, but I had to carry some stuff in the saddlebags, and you know, that kind of calls for the bigger bike, I guess. So you know, when it comes down to it, just a choice, you know. You definitely want to think about where you live at when it comes to if you're going to go between an air-cooled or a liquid-cooled bike. There are some plenty of good V-twins out there that are liquid-cooled. Yamaha makes a few of them. Kawasaki's Vulcan is definitely a legend in the liquid-cooled V-twin department. It's a good, solid bike all around. I've rode a couple of them, and I like both of them. The bigger V-twin and the little 900 as well. Very powerful, very good, very comparable bikes. So when it comes down to it, you know, just choose where you are. You know, if you're in a hot climate and expect it to be hot most of the time, and you don't expect to ride in conditions where it's cooler, I recommend liquid cooled. If you're in an area that gets kind of a variance in temperature like we do here, you know, we can have temperatures anywhere from Crud, we've been negative temperatures before, but we've been all the way up to 113 as well on a summer day. So whenever you got a kind of a temperature swing, you know, I recommend going with an air-cooled if you can, especially if you don't expect to be in the city very often. Unfortunately, like I said, here I am, and now I'm starting to cook. But definitely, I do like the parallel twin on the idea. I got a buddy that rides, that works with me. He has a parallel twin Suzuki 500, and it is air-cooled, but that's just the thing. The way it's designed, it gets, how's it going? Oh, it's for a YouTube channel. I record for YouTube and just kind of talk about my rides and stuff like that. So you can look me up anytime, Rabbit Hedgehog. So one of those things, right? But anyway, so sorry about that. People ask questions about it all the time. It's kind of cool. But anyway, back to his GS500. He definitely gets better power from his, even when it gets a little bit warmer, than I get from mine. Mostly because that parallel twin, it's able to you know, cool down a lot easier, especially sitting still. It has more of a better design for it to actually channel air through the engine a lot better, even while sitting still. And it does have quite a bigger oil cooler on it as well. Harley-Davidson's oil coolers are not very big at all, and this one on this Sportster is probably like 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches or so, not on the lower end of the frame. So it doesn't offer too terrible much in the cooling department. But you know, like I said, when it comes down to it, as long as you're riding, as long as you're moving, that's the best thing for your air-cooled V-twins. They definitely like it better when they get to move. And here comes another thing. You know, we'll talk about riding in the city a little bit. You know, when it comes to riding in the city, it's kind of, you know, nothing major. Where I'm at, there's not as much traffic as, you know, generally you'd see around other places, but there's enough. And I think he derailed. Huh, that's interesting. Okay, but at any rate, when it comes down to it, the traffic around the city, you know, you just got to learn how to get through it and kind of not be afraid in a way. When it comes to motorcycle riding, I have to say this, always be somewhat afraid. And the reason why, it keeps you more aware, keeps you looking out, it keeps you always scanning for what could be ahead. And that's the one way you want to ride, is somewhat always afraid, but not to the point you're terrified and you don't ride correctly. So, you know, just remember that whenever you ride, always have that slight bit of a scaredness that like something can go wrong, and it will keep you on the lookout for that possibility. And so never ever get too comfortable. And that's part of how you get through the city, because you know, there's a lot of things that happen within the city that you don't normally get out in the country like this. Two-lane roads, you know, barely anything could go wrong except the person behind you not paying attention to you stopping and slamming into the rear view. You know, or at an intersection here, somebody just completely misses the sign and flies right through it. You know, once again, always be somewhat afraid, so you're always looking. But whenever you're on multi-lane streets, then you have to deal with that problem of people on their cell phones, people texting, people playing with GPS devices going through the middle of town, trying to figure out where they're going. You know, things of that nature. It's things that you have to constantly look for, and you always, as a motorcycle rider, want to be aware of who those people are. You always want to scan for them, so that way you know who you're dealing with and who you're you know, who you're next to. So you can keep an eye out for that person that might accidentally wander into your lane and shove you off and things like that, because when it comes down to it, when they start to come over and they don't see you, you're going to follow you all the way into the wall, the curb, or the car next to you. They don't know you're there, so you're either going to have to back off on speed, hopefully there's nobody behind you, give it some gas, honk the horn, do what you can to get noticed and get away. That's just how you have to do it. So riding in the city can and will be a scary thing for all people at all times, because you just never exactly know, especially the intersections in the neighborhoods and things like that. Many of them, you know, have problems with upkeep, or they have something decorative that might block a little bit of the vision. And since you're so much smaller than the car, you always got to keep a lookout for those people that may or may not see you, you know. And, you know, like at this corner here, there's a lot of grass that was grown up there, and, you know, I had to pull a little bit more forward. And then you got this guy that's not even looking. See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Always be ready in an intersection for somebody to pull out from you in the city, because you just don't know. You don't know when they're going to come. You don't know when they're going to show up. And, you know, always have your hands ready to go whenever you see something like that. You couldn't see my feet at that point, but I was already pretty much covering that back brake, and then I had my front brake applied just watching him. So I would have been able to stop quick enough if anything would have happened. But, you know, it's something that we as a biker always need to look out for, is those people that don't see us, because we're not visible. You know, we're not as, you know, as showy as a car. Definitely not as big. We're 600 pounds of machine and human, and they're 1,200 pounds or more of car and steel. So just remember, always watch the intersections, especially the intersections like the one I'm coming up on here. This one's completely blind. You can't actually see anything coming around, and you know, you could get hurt on that too. Let's see, yeah. I don't know who just squealed on me there, but that wasn't me. Oh well. At any rate, also when you're in the city, you know, and here in Oklahoma, we're not allowed to lane split. I know that's most of the nation. Lane splitting is considered very dangerous, except for very few states. And when it comes down to that, I have to say, always, whenever you pull up on somebody, don't pull up next to their left light. Pull up in the center of their car. Number one, you're in the rearview mirror of the people in front of you. That way, if they look back and need to back up for some reason, which people do, you know, they see you and they don't back over you. The second thing about that is, especially at night, you're gonna not blend into that tail light as much. You're gonna actually be able to be seen between those two tail lights, and hopefully they won't pull into your rear or anything like that. So remember that when you're in the city. So, you know, big things about city riding: choose the bike that you know can make it based on the climate that you have. If you're in a cooler climate, then air-cooled and liquid-cooled is just fine. If you're in an extremely hot climate, I always recommend going to the liquid-cooled only type bikes. So this one, like I said, air-cooled. It is getting quite hot. It is 100 degrees out here, but I needed the vehicle that could carry my stuff. I went and bought some new boots today. I'll show later that, you know, about riding gear and things like that. So I needed to load those up somewhere. So at any rate, this is the Rapid Hedgehog. If you got any suggestions that you want me to talk about while I'm riding, just let me know in the comments below, and I'll be happy to get with you. If you got any questions, let me know, and I'll answer them for you. And once again, this is the Rapid Hedgehog. Keep the shiny side up and be safe out there, everybody. Have a good one.